Welcome to another episode of Coffee with Nancy on KOTRT.tv, also known as Knights of the Round Table. Nancy asked me a great question the other day about the Great Divide, wokeism versus being red-pilled, left versus right, I guess. So Nancy, welcome to the podcast. Great catching up with you again. What are your thoughts on what's happening right now where the extreme left and the extreme right?
We are at a critical divide in America. And for lack of better terms, the euphemism that's used for both sides, or maybe even the extreme or the fringe of either side, are woke on the left and red-pilled on the right. And if we go back and we just look at where did these terms originate and how did they evolve and what do they mean today, and then we can jump off from there. The first time that really we hear the word woke was back in 1928 from a Jamaican philosopher named Marcus Garvey. And he was writing about Ethiopia and about Africa becoming conscious of their blackness, becoming conscious of their power. And back then, this Jamaican philosopher was calling for Black people all over the world to globally unite. That's the first time we really hear that word woke, or as Marcus Garvey was saying, wake up Africans. Then the next time we really hear it is a few years later in 1938 in a protest song by a blues singer named Lead Belly. And Lead Belly was writing about the Scottsboro boys, or the Scottsboro young men. I can't remember how many of them. I think maybe there were 5 of them, but they were accused of raping a white woman. And he wrote a protest song about what happened to the Scottsboro boys. And then the next time we hear it is with the Ferguson and the Michael Brown affair. And that is when it started getting into popular culture today. And I can't remember what year Ferguson was. Was it, I can't remember, but whenever it was, a few years later in 2018, the word woke became so mainstream that was the first time that it was included in the Oxford English Dictionary.
Didn't know that.
And what woke meant at its heart was a consciousness of what the plight of the African Americans in America and all over the world, and the social injustices that had happened to them, basically at the hands of white people. It was also about an understanding of white privilege. It also had to do with Black Lives Matter. It also had to do with police reform. It also had to do with climate change. And that was the foundation of the woke movement. It was initially, and really at the heart of it, it was about racial justice. The red pills, and I think everyone knows where that came from. The red pills came from the movie The Matrix. And in the movie The Matrix, we all lived in an AI bubble of this fantasy that we kind of robotically moved around in. And when you were offered a red pill, you could take this red pill and you would wake up that you were in a matrix, and that there were rabbit holes all around you, and there was something more than just being a blue-pilled sheep. Years after 1999, the first time that the alt-right started appropriating red pilled for themselves was with Alex Jones. And Alex Jones started talking about the deep state being pretty much synonymous with the matrix, and that people were to come out of the matrix and become red pilled. Red pilled went from Alex Jones to Reddit forums of redpill.com, Red Pill America. And it's very hard to pin down exactly what red pill means because it is very nebulous. But generally speaking, red pill means America, it means Donald Trump. And when I say America, it means raw America. It means Donald Trumpism. It means fighting against radical feminism. It means fighting against unlimited immigration, especially Muslims coming into America. And it also stands for apple pie, Christianity, and the nuclear family. And it's interesting that when you're coming out of the matrix, you're waking up. When you take the red pill, you wake up. And the same thing is true when you are woke. You have woken up to the injustices that have gone on systemically against people of color in our nation. And when you are red pilled, you're waking up to the deep state and how socialism is creeping in, the confiscation of guns are creeping in, the dismembering of Christianity, prayer in school, it is creeping in. And that is the great divide, the woke folks and the red pilled folks. And there's very little intersection of what these two people stand on, what their ideology is, what they yearn for, what they're willing to die for, fight for. It's like a great divide.
I love how you've shown that both sides, in a way, are looking for what they see as the truth, right? So
Yes.
wokeism on the left is waking up to the truth, being aware of what's happening around you, putting things in their mind in the correct context, right? And then
Right.
on the other side, they're also getting red-pilled, and in the context of the Matrix, it means to accept and wake up to your reality. But they couldn't be further from the truth, right? So if I take the example of the wokeism on the left, from what I've seen, it has borders. And what I mean by that is they're woke to a certain level, right? They're woke as long as it's within their suburb or their city or their state or even their country. But you have a look at the injustices and the outrage, and rightfully so, of what happened with Floyd. Yet that doesn't translate when they see a child in Gaza with a knee on its throat, his or her throat, right? There's not the same outrage. So that's why I kind of see it as hypocritical in many ways, because there's only an outrage when potentially it's signaling to their own tribe or signaling to the world that, hey, look, I'm for justice. You know, I'm virtue signaling. And on the other side, like you said, like the red-pilled, sometimes they do go down a rabbit hole of, you know, there are tunnels under New York with children, right? They take it to extremes where there are literally conspiracies everywhere as well. And they believe they're the only ones that see things as they are. So seeing those two very distinct and very opposite sides of things in a way, where do you see any common ground, Nancy? Is that possible?
Before we go there, we should do a disclaimer. I think that You and I are two people that are in the middle. I mean, there's very few people who are on the middle. And I'm on the middle to the woke side. And I think you're kind of to the middle on the red side, which makes us a very interesting, albeit wonderful team here. My question to you in your indictment of the woke folks is how much when we have tens of thousands of deaths in the inner cities of the United States, black on black, drug related, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people are dying month after month due to poverty in the inner cities, due to poor schools in the inner city, lack of parenting in the inner city, systemic guns, gangsterism, every kind of ill you could imagine in the inner city that we in our white suburbs ignore because it does not affect us. And when these woke people are wanting to address all of this and climate change and et cetera, how much are we responsible for all of the other woes all over the world? If the Uyghurs in China are being put in prison camps, if women in Saudi Arabia are still being kept like they were hundreds and hundreds of years ago with basically no civil rights, and of course Gaza, which we both know is a complete abomination what Israel does to them. How much are we really responsible for policing the world and taking on all of the ills that are, it's not just Gaza, there are grave injustices of human rights all over the world. And there's hunger all over the world, child trafficking all over the world. Can we really hold the woke people responsible because they're not protesting all of those injustices all over the world?
Well, no. Obviously, you can't hold any individual or group accountable to all the injustices around the world, but I can absolutely call them out for their hypocrisy, right? So I can absolutely make them aware, and then potentially they might be able to act. So obviously, you expect people to act locally, but, think globally. And what I mean by that is if you want to fight for equality, then fight for equality wherever you see it, inequality wherever you see it, fight against it. And if you want, freedom, then we all can't, if one of us is enslaved, then we all can't be free. And I think it's easy to get caught up in your own little world. But if more of us can think at a global scale, if more of us get involved in global politics, then maybe we'll see more compassion and empathy in global politics, right? And I believe that that's where we can put pressure on our politicians to act globally in a more just way, and we can try to fight some of the injustices that we see across the globe. But it all, like you said, it all starts with the individual. But you can't hold them obviously accountable for everything. But if we bring it to their attention and they're made aware of it, then at least they have the opportunity to act.
Now, I think that at least most of the people I know in the woke community would have a heart for Gaza. And it seems to me that it's more the red-pilled people that are pro-Israel, that love Israel, that are just...
or regurgitating what they're being told to believe, right?
Yes. So, but I do think that a lot of people on the woke side are pro-Palestinian.
Yeah, I think what people need to start doing is stop thinking about pro-Israel or pro-Palestine, but rather pro-civil liberties, pro-equality. Right. If Palestinians had equal rights, and were treated the same as a Israeli Jew, as an example, a lot of that injustice would go away. So I think fight for equality, fight for civil liberties, fight for justice. It doesn't have to be either or.
Where could we start if we were going to have like some type of a common middle ground, some type of a reapproachment? Where do you think that could even begin? I mean, there's no compromise on the guns, basically.
Take money out of politics. But no, go on, Nancy. Sorry to interrupt.
No.
So
that is something that both sides, right? That is good. Both sides could agree on term limits in Congress.
Yeah.
I think both sides could agree on that. And how about that would be an awesome start? Or how about this? What if both sides determined that we were not going to be an oligarchy, corporate oligarchy, to the extent that we are, and that these corporate elites are not going to buy our Congress as if they were paid whores with lobby money, which corrupts absolutely. Cory Booker used to be my son Noah's hero. He loved Cory Booker. And when Congress was faced with a bill that would have allowed us to purchase pharmaceuticals from Canada at like half the price, Cory Booker was given $250,000 by Big Pharma to vote against that bill in Congress. These people are bought and sold. If we could make that lobby money illegal, that would be another step that maybe we could both agree on.
Yeah, it goes even further than that. Did you hear what the latest allegation is from? I can't remember the guy's name, from the CEO of Overstock.com. So he just came out and said he was working with the FBI in setting up Hillary Clinton. And he was part of an operation where Hillary Clinton accepted close to $20 million in a bribe, right? And they were going to take her down over it. But then it basically got put on hold. It was fizzled away. And he was told it was because Hillary was being groomed for the election and that they were going to use that as leverage to control her, right? So think of this, right? If that, take it with a grain of salt, right? But just say that is true and that's the way the game is played. What dirt did they have on Obama? What dirt do they have on Trump? What dirt do they potentially have on Biden? If that is the way it's being played, and just let's assume for a second they're all corrupt, and they've all got something hanging over them that's being used as leverage, then I think even more reason to pull as much as we can when it comes to money out of politics. So hopefully we can end up with some clean politicians if they exist, right?
It has gotten to the point, not only do we have the Great Divide, but the Great Divide also has its own echo chambers where the red pills have their own Newsmax, One America News, they have Fox News, they have QAnon, Twitter News, and the other side has the New York Times, CNN, MSNBC. Each side has their own heroes. The left has Rachel Maddow, they have the Squad, they have Bernie Sanders. The other side has Donald Trump, they have Donald Trump, they have Donald Trump. So each side has its own echo chamber and its own heroes. And finding some common ground would just go a long way to having some type of reapproachment. I can't even say healing because the ideologies are just so at odds with one another, but if we could have any
Well,
common ground, we can't even have climate change because one side thinks it's real, the other side thinks it's a hoax. We can't even have COVID measures. One side thinks masks are a joke and COVID is overblown. The other side thinks masks are an absolute necessity and COVID is deadly. It's hard to find any common ground.
yeah, I think there were certain issues that both sides could probably agree on if we could have decent discussions instead of little sound bites in media, and then all the rhetoric that's created and all the clickbait that the news media are trying to propagate. So I would say if we discussed, as an example, the election and how to secure it and how to make sure that federally we're all playing by the same rules and local legislators don't have the power to influence an entire federal election, I think that would be a good start. Stamping out pedophilia, right? I think both sides, it's a strong topic for the right, especially with the Patriots. I would say both sides would happily fight for that. Less war. I think both sides, no matter, there's certain things there that I think we could find common ground upon. But go on, Nancy.
I literally have people that I love on both sides. Do you?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I actually have people I deeply respect on both sides. Yep. And it's very hard for me because I find myself sometimes being disingenuous in that when I'm with my red pill friends, I tend to go, yeah, yeah, yeah. And when I'm with my woke friends, I tend to go, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm trepidatious actually of offending them because things are so raw right now. When we did our last video on the election, and I said, let's just go ahead and audit the machines, basically to shut everyone up. How can we put this to bed? Let's just audit the machine, and if it was Biden by 7 million votes, then the red-pilled right has to be quiet and say Joe Biden is our legally, fairly elected president of the United States of America. I thought that would be an appropriate way to make everybody happy, but my friends on the woke side who heard that I even suggested that we should audit the machines were not happy and furious.
Yeah, even the podcast we're doing right now, Nancy, I'm sure we're going to cop grief from both sides over things that we've said, but I'm not going to be intimidated or swayed by that. I think we need to be able to feel confident and safe to have these conversations openly. If we are going to find any common ground, we need to start by having open dialogue without fear of being cancelled or fear of being censored, right?
Right. And this is a good start. This is a...
Absolutely.